I'm Scott Al Miller. It's the 14th of September, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua. Today we're going to be talking about the rising Nicaraguan middle class and how that is changing everything you see when you're coming to visit or coming to live in Nicaragua. We're going to get to that right after the bump. All right, after the last few days, I've done quite a bit of walking around, and that was a lot of fun. And I do have my new Tivas, so I do have some flexibility to go out and walk some more places. These have the solid sole, so I don't have that problem where it gets wet, I slip and destroy the sandals. So hopefully that will make some things a bit easier. I now know that basically I just always have to have these because I don't know when I'm going to get caught in the rain, and that will ruin my sandals. They're not exactly cheap, and they're very hard to get here because of the size of my feet, as y'all know. All right, but today's topic, we're gonna be talking about the rising middle class here in Nicaragua while I hang out in the garden because I need to avoid walking today just because I'm so busy. I haven't had any time to record yesterday or today in real life, so I'm struggling to make sure we're getting the show done in time. So this is a major thing. When I first lived here in 2015, the middle class in Nicaragua was incredibly small to the point where you basically never talked about it. It really wasn't a thing. Of course, they always existed, but it was a very small segment of society, and you didn't encounter them on a day-to-day basis. You really had a small number of very wealthy individuals and a very large number of people who were relatively poor. And of course, there's always ranges and there's always exceptions and lots of things, but you really lacked a lot of middle class. You didn't have a lot of people who were working in professional positions. Of course, there were doctors and stuff, but there was a lot of things that were missing. And a lot of that in the interim has been replaced as a huge portion of the economy has shifted from tourism, which tends to create very entry-level jobs by and large, with things like call centers and technical support and a lot more office and professional type work, which tends to lean a lot towards being more middle class and require a lot more skills and specialty skills, such as systems administration or speaking English, or accounting, another one that's quite big. Because of this, we've seen a shift not only towards a general middle class from a professional and working perspective, but that opens up a lot of doors for people to own their own businesses. So there's a explosion of small and slightly larger businesses that have erupted around the country as the shift has happened. And this happened a lot between 2015 and say 2019, that the environment changed here a lot. And combined with that, or because of that, the government and private companies have put a lot of work into changing what housing looks like around the country. When we first lived here in 2015, and obviously before that, there was a lot of very rough, what we would call shanty towns, some relatively poor housing that was often as an expat visiting, or as a tourist, I guess. That's what we call expats who are just visiting. It was very shocking just how rough so much of the housing was, and what the communities were often like. Of course, the colonial downtowns here in Leon or in Granada have not changed in centuries, but the outlying areas have changed quite a bit. And other cities that are much newer have changed dramatically. Many of their structures have gone up in the last decade or so. What we really have seen in the last 8 years or so is this massive shift from the traditional low-cost housing to incomes being a little bit higher, so there's more spending power, but there's also been this really large move from the government or from private organizations, often backed by the government or nonprofits or other governments that are helping to sponsor projects here, as they build upgraded housing that is really targeted at creating a middle-class living situation. And which factors are really driving the change in culture is difficult to say. I'm sure experts would know, right? But looking at the economy as someone who lives here and has lived here on and off for a long time, it's really evident that the country has changed its outlook on its own people very dramatically. And this shift of this very large portion of the population that was in lower class incomes 8 years ago is now in lower middle class and middle class incomes today, and suddenly people who are living in shanties or struggling to get out of them, or putting a lot of people into a single home, right? Grandparents and parents and children and just extended aunts and uncles, just people crammed in, is suddenly now people are starting to look at 2-bedroom homes where it's just parents and kids, or 3-bedroom homes and maybe the kids have their own bedrooms, or maybe the grandparents are still there but it's not everybody in one home, and maybe people are living next door to their parents or around the corner rather than in the same house. This stuff is completely changing everything. Right? It's changing how people go to work. It's changing who works. It's changing where people live. And of course, right now there is an excess of housing, and there is a lot of people leaving the country looking for work. And those are active things that are going on, and that's slowing this process down. But it isn't changing the fact that this process exists and that there's this unbelievable move towards having a middle class. Now, of course, most cultures want to have a middle class. That is a desirous thing. It generally is a sign of a very healthy economy and a healthy society. You want a bell curve. You do want a few people who are quite wealthy. Generally, you want a few people who are quite poor. Not really, but it's going to happen in most healthy situations. But the majority of people you want under the bell curve to be in the middle class range, where they're able to go out and enjoy life. They're able to do things. They're able to spend money. They're able to hire people to do things. They're able to specialize. Right? When you get very poor, you're stuck with, you have to cook for yourself. You have to clean for yourself. You have to garden for yourself. You have to fix your own computer. You have to fix your own car. You have to know how to do a million things. And your opportunity to do any of them well is very low. When you reach a solid middle class, you start being able to have everybody have a specialty, or the majority of people have a specialty. And this allows someone to be good at computers, and someone to be good at cars, and someone to be good at cooking, and someone to be good at cleaning, and to find things that they enjoy rather than everyone being forced to do everything. And find things that you're good at. And it allows society to become much more productive as a whole. And it doesn't require you to buy more things. It doesn't require you to spend more. It changes that people who like and are good at cooking do that. And people who like to fix cars and are good at that will do that. And you get more efficiency and you get more happiness because you're able to spend your time doing things you enjoy and things that you are good at. And that means everybody is getting more out of the same amount of labor, and everybody wins. People have to work less and get more. Now, other things tend to come with that, right? You tend to have more consumer spending, and people start wanting to have more furniture and more fancy furniture and bigger cars and newer cars, and those kinds of things may potentially change, and they can bring positives and negatives. But simply the specialization, allowing people to be more efficient, is a huge positive to the whole middle classization of society. So what this means to those of you who may be looking at moving to Nicaragua, or have put in some time researching in the past, or you have stories from the past, information that may be a little bit out of date, Nicaragua is fundamentally a very different country today than what it was the 8 years ago when I first came here. It feels different. It looks different. It operates differently. Restaurants are more plentiful today, and they're full of Nicaraguans who are going out and doing normal things that even as Americans or Canadians would often be seen as quite expensive and difficult to do. I was just reading an article. Now, this is BuzzFeed, so take it with the proverbial grain of salt. It's really there for entertainment, not for news, but it shows up on my feed, and sometimes I find it interesting. But Americans talking about how people who are making close to 6 figures and still struggle to be able to go out to eat more than once a week, being able to go out to the bar for drinks rather than drinking at home, being able to hire someone to do basic services for them, just doing much of anything, going out to the movies, all things that are becoming prohibitively expensive. The United States is actually looking at losing its middle class, or its middle class is struggling horribly. They're starting to have to pinch pennies and live much like we associate with much lower class groups. Here in Nicaragua, when we talk about the middle class, we're talking about people who can go out to eat many times per week, people who can travel on the weekend to do things that are very interesting. For example, if you live in Managua, perhaps, now look at a map so you know where these things are. Managua is a few hours from the coast, or you could get there in a little bit under 2 hours. But so someone who lives in Managua may spend quite a frequent weekend driving a few hours, taking a taxi or a bus, probably not a taxi, taking a bus or driving with friends out to one of the beaches, getting a hotel room or sharing a house for the weekend, hanging out on the beach, drinking, eating, going to restaurants, maybe going out dancing or going to some other type of party, going to listen to live music for 1 or 2 nights out away from the city. This is a really popular thing to do, and people who are solidly middle class are able to do this. And it may require a little bit of budgeting. It may not be a non-cost event. It's something they're certainly putting some of their money towards, but it's something that they're able to put their money towards in a way that I think you'd be hard pressed to find Americans who live within a few hours of the coast who earn entry middle class wages, or what we generally would consider that, who are able to then simply pack up, drive to the coast, get a hotel room, maybe work on a budget quite a bit, but stay in a hotel 1 or 2 nights per week. And of course, we're not saying that people do this every week, but it could be 1 or 2 times per month, and staying 1 or 2 nights each time in a hotel or an Airbnb or whatever on the coast, and then going out drinking, hanging out, having parties, eating at restaurants for the entire time that they're gone, and then going back to their city to work and having their own apartment, being able to go out to eat several nights a week. Those kinds of things are actually within the budget of entry middle-class Nicaraguans. So when we talk about the middle class in Nicaragua, while the physical amount of money may be far less than the income you would expect in the United States. For example, you are solidly within the middle class here in Nicaragua, making somewhere between $750 and $900 per month. By the time you hit $1,000 per month, you are well into the middle class and able to do a lot of things. Now, that is as a single person having an income, right? If you have a family with more people, you're going to have to adjust that a little bit. But to give you an idea, right, a person who is making $800 or $900 per month living in Managua is going to have a financial power to have a lifestyle that most likely exceeds an American making $40 or $50, possibly $60,000 per year. At $900 a month, you're likely to be able to have an apartment, go out to eat regularly, do things like we said, going on trips on weekends all the time, staying at hotels regularly, and still put a small amount of money away and very possibly invest in your own business. And I know a large number of people who have done these things and have managed to, while doing that, save up and buy their own companies that are with employees, and start immediately with employees, not needing to start in it as a micro business and slowly grow up and have the business fund itself, but to be able to fund out of their own pockets businesses with employees, with equipment and specialty stuff, and get office space and all that. With, of course, some amount of work. Not super simple. Starting a business and being successful at a business is always hard, but the ability to do that is well within the reach of people who are making these kinds of salaries. And to have their own home and live in a city away from their parents, and to be able to have a car and travel, all those things are within that type of budget. So that gives you a feel of the middle class here generally has more access to the ability to go out and do things within their own country than Americans in middle class are able to do, or that we understand that they're able to do today, while also earning wages that Americans would often be completely shocked at. And it can be confusing just how little money it takes to earn here to be able to be in the middle class. Now, of course, there's some things that we take for granted in the United States. For example, the easy access to Amazon shopping and things that will just show up at your house without thinking twice. We don't have that here. And so being in the middle class does not give you access to that magically. You are still stuck shopping in the markets and doing the same things as other Nicaraguans. That's not going to change just because you're in the middle class. And it's called the middle class because there's a great number of people in it. This is not a sliver of society as it was in 2015. This is now a massive amount of society. This is a huge percentage of the population is now living in this world where they're able to go out and do things. And every day more people are shifting into it. So we're seeing this amazing move of the relatively poor or the very poor shifting up as jobs become available, as careers become available, as skills become taught, and people are able to work in more and more of these types of jobs. And as you drive around, especially places like Managua, you start to notice very quickly that in 2015, we weren't really seeing upscale malls very often. Of course, they existed, but they were rare. Now they're much more plentiful. The shopping plazas, the fancy restaurants, the cafes and places to sit outside, and very upscale activities, things that you would associate with being in California and having brunch. You can do that all over Managua. And of course, you can also do it in Granada or in San Juan del Sur, to some lesser extent here in Leon, definitely in Chinandega, certainly in Esteli. all over the country, you're seeing this rise of the middle class, both in the local regions, but also with this larger group in Managua who are then traveling throughout the country. Of course, the majority of higher paying jobs always remains in the capital. It's just how it generally is. Think England and how almost all of the good jobs are in London. Are there good jobs in Manchester? Of course, but not at the same rate that there is in London. There's also not the poverty in Manchester that you expect in London. You expect the absolute poorest situations to exist in the major cities. That is true here as well, but you definitely expect the largest number of upper income people to be in the big cities, with some exceptions. For example, here in Nicaragua, Chichigalpa and Chinandega have the absolute richest families around, but it's more of an anomaly. It is not a trend. As someone who lives here and participates in Nicaraguan society, it's really encouraging to see this change happen, but it's also really important to understand and I started this in the last segment, that you really have to look and see that there is this world of people that you may not have expected are going out and hanging out in restaurants, going out drinking, going to parties, going out dancing, that have this disposable income and are looking for places to spend it. Water parks are very busy here. There's lots of them. They tend to be relatively small, but they're in all over the place, and people go to them regularly because it is a warm place and you can use a water park year round. So, in the United States, you typically need a water park to be busy in the summer and probably closed in the winter. But here, they're open year round, and they don't need to be super busy at any given time. They can just be moderately busy all year round and do quite well. Those types of activities, movie theaters and such, are getting busier and busier as people are going out more and more, and a larger segment of society is able to go out. We're noticing that nice restaurants are popping up with great frequency and staying open and staying busy, because the number of people that are able to go to the restaurants is increasing at the same rate that people are opening new restaurants. If 100 new people enter the able to go out to eat regularly ranks in a given month, well, we need enough restaurants to open to handle 100 people on any given night to open around the country to absorb that additional demand, or else the existing restaurants are going to get really busy. They're going to need to put people somewhere, right? Like, it has to kind of grow to expand. And that's what we're seeing happen. It's really interesting. So Nicaragua today is a very different country than it was even when we moved here 2.5 years ago, and certainly completely different than when I visited in 2019, and way different than what it was when I lived here briefly in 2015. It is changing very quickly and in a very positive way. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't see. Even watching my videos, I think it's difficult to see this change happening because you don't know what I'm showing and you don't see the same place over time necessarily. To some small degree you do, but you're often seeing areas that are very affected by a downturn in tourism. And so you may see a lot of things like in Las Piñas and Ponaloya or in San Juan del Sur, you're going to tend to see things that have done quite badly economically during this time because they're tourism based. But if you go into Managua, what used to be areas that were very, very bad previously may now be beautiful new housing complexes. There are amazing new condos or gated communities with gorgeous new houses popping up all over the place. Amazing in restaurants with a great variety of food, and new gastro parks and live music venues are popping up in really interesting and sometimes quite far-flung locations. Suddenly people are traveling great distances to go to venues that they're really interested in, whether it's a campestre, a place to hang out in the country and do more traditional food but enjoy a country setting, or if it's to go to a fancy restaurant that's located in a city far away. People are going on Instagram and looking at pictures of food and restaurants and their views and deciding to travel to go to dinner, or maybe travel for the weekend and do things in the mountains or in the country. Festivals are starting to draw people from other parts of the country where previously that was very difficult. This whole world of traveling and doing things and going out to more fancy things is really quite new. And so we're watching this change in real time. And if you're interested in visiting Nicaragua, it's important to have this context of just 8 years ago, essentially this didn't exist, and it is still in a state of flux as it grows and improves, and it's very exciting to see it happening. It's very exciting to work in the hospitality space and have restaurants where traditionally this would have been only expats that were coming to these places, and now it's almost exclusively Nicaraguans. And that's so encouraging that this is becoming something that Nicaraguans are able to consume and use their own beautiful country, and it's not all for expats and the Nicaraguans are just working to service them. So that's fantastic. But it's also very important if you're looking at moving here to understand that any information you have from more than a couple years ago tends to paint a picture of Nicaragua as a place without the middle class, and that was accurate. And now you really need to look at it as a place that has a very large middle class and a very rapidly growing middle class, and an expected to completely blossom and take over middle class, especially as education catches up to the needs. And this is going to transform Managua, but also the outlying cities. It's going to change the beaches. It's going to change how everything in society is approached. And so, you know, I know a lot of people have come and see or generally see Nicaragua. And a lot of things that hit people here is, of course, the littering problem. We've talked about this ad nauseum. It's hot. That's never going to change, regardless of the economics of anything. That there is no shopping options, that there's very few entertainment options. There are some, but there aren't the plethora that you expect in other markets. And these are things that are going to be changing. We're watching them change very rapidly. For example, the escape facility at Plaza Natura is a great example where things like bowling really didn't exist in the country before laser tag didn't really exist. Of course, they probably existed somewhere, but very nice, new, classy facilities, like the best you would find in the United States or Canada, is available in Managua. Not in great numbers, but really nice places. Very well done, very modern, beautifully done, with restaurants and bars and an arcade and just all kinds of things. We're seeing trampoline facilities and other things that are popular. Other places are coming up in Managua. 8 years ago, we would not have expected to see these things at all, and today we're seeing them begin to come up, and new places are opening, and we expect just more and more, and we do see new things all the time. New restaurants, new entertainment, new venues, new opportunities are constantly arising, and this changing middle class is driving a new Nicaragua that is exciting, that is vibrant, and that is important to understand if you're looking at just coming here and understanding the country, to understand that this is a new middle class. This entire ecosystem is just happening now for the first time. And if you're looking at moving here, understanding that you're coming into a country that just a decade ago really had essentially no middle class, and today is being driven by it, and in the future is going to be dominated by it. And so many things about where you want to live and what activities there are to do and how society is going to interact are changing quite rapidly. And in some ways we can only guess how that's going to change in the future. And in other ways, we have a pretty solid idea that this entertainment-driven, very social middle class that is looking for more types of entertainment, that's looking for more outlets for entertainment, that is looking for more places to go, and is able to travel further afield and doesn't have to stay in their neighborhoods for everything that they do. All these things are coming. And hopefully bringing an exciting new chapter to Nicaragua with them. Thanks for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAllenMiller. If you'd like to get more information on consulting or private tours of the country or whatever, shoot us an email, info@relocatenicaragua.com. As always, like, subscribe, share on social media, tell your friends, tell your family, invite them to watch the show, get them to watch and learn more about this exciting region of the world, and I will see all of you tomorrow.